We hear the word corruption thrown around all the time, but what does it actually cost a country? I'm not just talking about dollars and cents. I'm talking about the cost in trust, in opportunities, and maybe most importantly, in hope. Today, we're going to dig into some new research that really gets to the bottom of the real-world impact of corruption in Belize. Okay, let's just start with something that absolutely stopped me in my tracks. Look at this. Over half of young Belizeans strongly agree that even if they speak out, nothing will change. And if you add in the people who just agree, you're looking at more than 94%. This isn't just kids being cynical. This is a deep, profound sense of hopelessness, and it's a symptom of a much bigger problem. So that's the big question for today, right? Why is this feeling so incredibly widespread? To figure that out, we really have to pull back the curtain and understand the system that's creating it in the first place. And here's how we're going to do it. First, we'll look at the human cost, how this affects daily life. Then, we'll unpack the system of favors that keeps it all going. We'll dive into what Belizeans themselves are saying, trace the economic damage, and then, and this is important, we'll look at how people are fighting back and what the solutions might look like. So let's start with that human cost. The research makes this really interesting point. Corruption basically acts like an unofficial tax on everybody. Every bribe, every government delay, every bit of money that goes missing, well, it just drives up the cost of doing business, it scares away investors, and it makes life more expensive and a lot harder for ordinary people. But how does this unofficial tax get so baked into the system? Well, the research points to this one core idea, something called political clientelism. Honestly, you can think of it as the engine that powers the entire machine. So what in the world is political clientelism? It's actually pretty simple when you break it down. It's an informal trade. Politicians hand out public resources. We're talking jobs, land, financial help, not based on who needs it or who's most qualified, but in a direct exchange for votes and political loyalty. It really is a system built on favors. And this is how it turns into a vicious cycle that just feeds itself. It all starts around election time, with this trade of votes for favors. Then, after the election, loyal supporters get rewarded with government jobs, whether they can do them or not. That means public money that should be going to things like schools or roads gets rerouted into these handouts. And over time, the very institutions that are supposed to help people get weaker and weaker, until corruption just becomes, well, the way things get done. Now, I want to be clear, this is not just some academic theory. The researchers went out and talked to Belizeans to see how this system is actually playing out in their lives. So let's take a look at what they found. So who did they talk to? The survey really captured the voice of the country's youth. We're talking mostly students and young adults. And this is key because these are the people who are inheriting this system and are trying to build a future for themselves right in the middle of it. And their opinion is, well, it's pretty much unanimous. A jaw-dropping 94.1% believe that corruption isn't just a problem, they think it is actively getting worse. And look at this. For nearly 2/3 of the people they surveyed, this isn't some far-off political issue. It is a direct personal experience. They have actually been pressured to pay a bribe or do a favor just to get a basic public service that they're supposed to be entitled to. So where are they feeling the pain the most? Almost everyone agrees it's hurting business and making it harder to start something new. A huge majority sees it for what it is, a system for rewarding political friends. And more than 70% feel it directly makes things like healthcare and infrastructure worse. And wow, this quote from a social media commentator that was cited in the research, it just cuts right to the heart of it all. It perfectly captures that raw, painful feeling of betrayal. Imagine paying into a system your entire working life, believing it'll be there for you, only to find out it's failed when you need it the most. That right there, that's the human cost. This feeling of betrayal, this erosion of trust, it has a massive economic price tag. That system of favors doesn't just crush spirits, it breaks economies. It kicks off a devastating domino effect that leads straight to more inequality and more poverty. And that's the key takeaway here. A system like this creates two totally different realities. There's one reality for the people with political connections, and then there's another one for everybody else. We can actually put a number on this gap. There's a tool called the Gini coefficient. Think of it like a golf score for inequality. The closer you are to zero, the more equal the society is. Well, back in 2018, Belize was at a 39.9, which points to a really significant level of income inequality. And this slide just makes that gap crystal clear. The poorest 20% of the population, they account for less than 6% of all the spending in the country. Meanwhile, the richest 20% account for almost half of all spending. Let that sink in. That is the divided economic reality we're talking about. And this problem isn't standing still. It's getting worse. The data shows a clear trend of rising poverty. It went from about a third of the population back in 2002 to over half by 2018. It just goes to show when resources are consistently misused, it's always the most vulnerable people who end up paying the steepest price. But here's the thing. Even with all these massive challenges, the story does not end in hopelessness. Not at all. All across Belize, there is a real, active fight for accountability that's growing stronger. And this push for change, it's coming from everywhere. You've got official groups like the Integrity Commission, you have these powerful movements like the teachers' strikes that put good governance front and center, and then you have the absolutely critical work being done by independent journalists, community groups, and incredibly brave whistleblowers who are dragging these secrets out into the light. So where does Belize go from here? Well, the great thing about this research is that it doesn't just point out the problems, it actually lays out some concrete blueprints for how to build a better, more transparent future. Okay, blueprint number 1 is all about breaking that cycle of favors. The idea is to create a truly independent commission that would take things like big government contracts, public hiring, and scholarships completely out of the hands of politicians. The goal is simple: make decisions based on what's best for the public, not on who you know. Blueprint number 2 gets at the root of the problem: dependency. If you can build strong, reliable social safety nets, think a modern pension system that actually works, you take away a huge amount of power that politicians hold over vulnerable people. When you don't have to rely on a political favor just to get by, the whole system of clientelism starts to lose its grip. And the third blueprint is all about what they call radical transparency. Just imagine this, a system where every single dollar the government spends, every contract, every salary, every payment is published online in real time for anyone to see. This would be a game changer for stopping shady deals and would go a long way in rebuilding trust, both at home and abroad. Which, brings us right back to where we started. The road from hopelessness to hope, it's not easy. It's going to require some deep structural changes. But as this research shows us, the blueprints are there. The real question now is whether they'll be followed. And if they are, can that powerful sense of hope for the future finally start to win out against that heavy feeling that nothing will ever change?